On your Friday episode of Locked On Raptors, Bobby Webster has spoken about the Brandon Ingram trade, and we've had a couple days to think about it. What does it mean for the Raptors in the short, medium, and long-term future? We'll get into all that and more coming up on today's show. Thanks for hanging.
You are Locked On Raptors, your daily Toronto Raptors podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, what's going on? And welcome to another episode of Locked On Raptors, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. It is Friday, September. What the hell? February the 7th. And I'm your host, Sean Woodley. It's been a long week. I've been covering the Toronto Raptors now for 11 seasons on various platforms. You can find all my work over on Blue Sky. The show's on Instagram as well, and you can join us in the Locked On Raptors Discord server. Link in the description of the podcast. Free to join, as always, to be part of our listener community. You can also support the daily Locked On Raptors newsletter, Toxic Positivity Friday. The blog post is in the works. You'll have that in your inbox later today, as you will have it 5 days a week if you go and subscribe. QR code on the screen, link in the description of the podcast. Again, it's very much appreciated when you support the newsletter because it's original writing. I'm putting my blood, sweat, and tears into this damn thing, and I really appreciate all those who have rocked with it so far and those who will rock with it in the future. Today's show is brought to you by our friends over at Game Time. Today, download the app, the Game Time app, that is, and create an account. Use the code LOCKEDNBA for $20 off your first purchase. And we are off and running here on your Friday edition of the show. Kind of taking a 10,000-foot view of the immediate, medium, and long-term impact of the Brandon Ingram trade, which we've been stewing over now for nearly 2 full days. And, I think for me, I started off, I was like a 5.5 out of 10 when I recorded the show yesterday morning in response to the trade. I think I talked myself to a 6 out of 10 by the time the show I did with Jake Madison of Locked On Pelicans was recorded. And now I'm up to like a 7 out of 10, having heard Bobby Webster speak today. I'm slowly talking myself further into this thing that I was kind of on the fence about, but I think I'm actually into it. And here to talk about whether he's into it or not is our pal Vivek Jacob from Raptors in 7, from Sportsnet, from Sportscasting, from Basketball Insiders, the whole damn internet. God damn it. Big V, where are you at on the Brandon Ingram trade? How you feeling now? How were you feeling when it happened? Give me your big take before we dive into the sort of outlook that it means for the Raptors going forward.
Yeah, so the rumors first started with the Mark Stein and Jake Fisher reporting that Masai is a big fan of Brandon Ingram's game, and there have been some discussions. So I was intrigued by the idea then. And then I was more and more caught on to it, the day before it happened. And then it happened, and yeah, I'm all in. I've been a fan of this move. And I like Brandon Ingram as a player. I think that I think the first time he really, really appealed to me was, I believe it was the 2021 playoffs where they had that first round against the Phoenix Suns.
Yep.
And he legit looked like a, capital GUY, like down the stretch, taking big shots, making big shots. There was really no way to keep him from getting to his spots. And that's something that he's kind of continued over the course of his career. He hasn't had that, postseason showcase opportunity since. Obviously, they were in the playoffs last year, but he was injured for that. So yeah, he hasn't had the opportunity to showcase that. But yeah, I'm a fan of his game, and I think what I'm intrigued about is the fact that, this is about next season.
Yeah.
Brandon Ingram has not played since December 7th. I do not anticipate him playing much the rest of the way. As long as you keep the tank in play and you are thereabouts in that top 5 pick range, I think it's a great, great move.
Yeah, I think, hearing Bobby Webster talk today, it sounds like they're still very much committed to, we're not super interested in winning a bunch of games down the stretch. Now, the schedule might have other plans in store because they play a buttery schedule down the back stretch against a whole bunch of other teams that will also be trying to lose. So they're going to pick up some wins along the way, like it or not. But where they're at right now, I think they have a 4-game cushion on the 7, 8, 9 range of teams: the Sixers, the Blazers, the Bulls. You know, they're going to be, it's going to be tough for them to fall any lower than 6th or 7th, I think, in the lottery standings. And yeah, you add a high pick to this team with the infusion of talent that Brandon Ingram is, the buy low infusion of talent. The logic makes perfect sense to me. It always did, like even from the day the trade happened, the minute the trade happened. I still need to be sold a little bit on the fit, and the health concerns are a real thing, I think, to kind of bake into all of this. But the logic of, you know, kind of hitting the gas pedal with a really high pick plus Brandon Ingram with the team they already have, which of late has shown some pretty interesting signs, I think it makes a lot of sense. You know, as far as what it means for the rest of this season, I think this is where the sort of national coverage of this trade has just been so lazy, frankly, and misguided, and just sort of leaning on old tropes. Like, this is not the Jakob Poeltl trade. They are not pushing for the play in here. What this means down the stretch is, yeah, they'll try to get Ingram in for a couple games. I think they want to see, Bobby Webster said today, like they want to see the fit, how it all works with their main guys at some point. There are 31 games. There's plenty of opportunity to get those guys in. But there is going to be a whole lot of rookie ball played by the Raptors down the stretch here as well. A lot of Jacoby Walter, a lot of Jamal Shed, a lot of Jonathan Mobo, a lot of Ulrich Champche. His name was brought up by Bobby Webster as well. Like, they're going to try to lose gracefully with rookies learning on the fly for the most part here. And I think that's, you know, very clear. It seemed telegraphed the second they made the trade for a guy who's been hurt. This never, you know, sniffed to me like a deal where they were going to go and push for the play-in. This is the deal about next season, as Bobby Webster said. And I think that is why I'm very much on board with, again, the thinking behind the trade. The logic of it makes a lot of sense. Is Ingram the right player? We'll find out. He's got to adapt quite a bit. If you haven't listened yet, the show I did yesterday with Jake Madison, I thought was pretty informative as far as like what Ingram's mindset has been in New Orleans, what might change when he comes to Toronto. New Orleans, kind of a hellscape, it seems. No one seems very happy there. Maybe there's a revitalized sort of, you know, openness to adaptability for Brandon Ingram that kind of changes the calculus of the fit with Scotty Barnes in particular. But yeah, for the short term, this is them kind of trying to hit the gas pedal out of the rebuild a little quicker. And I think that was always the move, considering where they were at with the contracts they have on hand. You know, if I had to give you the over-under here, Big V, 31 games left. How many times do you think we see IQ, RJ Barrett, Scotty, Ingram, and Poeltl play together in a game down the stretch? If I set the over-under at like 7.5, over or under?
I will take the under.
Yeah?
I think you know, there's a good chance we see some combination of those guys. I'll be very surprised if we see all of them.
Sure.
I think the Raptors have tinkered enough with the lineups to know which ones bring success and which ones don't. And so it was goodbye, Bruce. Goodbye. I think, you know, Jakob Poeltl is dealing with this hip pointer thing. I think they'll be very particular about how they manage that the rest of the season. You know, I'm not gonna speculate about a head injury, but I imagine that they will take their time with RJ as well in bringing him back. Yeah. And yeah, we'll see, you know, what Quickly's minutes look like the rest of the way. We've yet to see him come off sort of a minutes restriction. And then yeah, so beyond that, like I can see combinations of those guys together. But if you're asking me about all of them together, I will take under 7.5.
Yeah, I think that's probably fair. I would like to see at least a good handful of games, particularly with Scotty and Ingram and Quickly, frankly. Like those three guys in particular, they're the ones they're invested in the most. Like, assuming they pay Ingram, which it sounds like they're going to, and it sounds like they're already kind of making strides on landing on a number that they're comfortable with. What that number is, TBD. And that's, again, going to be a big part of the calculus of, was this a good move or not? Is, you know, if Ingram's making a full max, changes things a little bit. It kind of makes things a little more dicey, but I don't think that's ultimately going to be where it lands. But yeah, seeing those three guys together, seeing how they can massage the fit, that's a big deal. Seeing the capacity for sort of changing the stripes of both Ingram and Scotty, which is going to be necessary. They operate in so much in the same areas of the floor right now. And Bobby Webster expressed today, like, not so much concern about that. He says there's lots of teams out there with guys who operate in similar spaces, but I do think for the offense to truly function, Ingram's going to have to take threes. Scotty's going to have to start making his catch and shoot threes at a better than 27% clip. Like, he's going to have to score at the rim more and be more willing to sort of duck the mid range and get to the rim. Can Ingram help open that up? A lot of that will depend on is he willing to shoot? Is he a dangerous shooter? Like, there's fit things to sort out, but that might be more of a next season thing to really kind of iron out in full. For now, it's a buy low talent acquisition, and it's an incremental upgrading in the overall capacity of this team, which very much is in line with how this front office has typically worked. We're going to come back on the other side here, Big V, and get into what this means for the summer and next season. What does this all look like? Are guys going to be on the outs? What happens with RJ Barrett? Can they pay for it all? We'll get to all that coming up in just 1 second. Today's show is brought to you by Robinhood Gold. With Robinhood Gold, you can now enjoy a VIP treatment, receiving a 3% IRA match on retirement contributions. The privileges of the very privileged are no longer exclusive. With Robinhood Gold, your annual IRA contributions are boosted by 3%. Plus, you always get 4% APY on your cash in non-retirement accounts. That's over 8 times the national savings average. The perks of the high net worth are now available for any net worth. The new gold standard is here with Robinhood Gold. To receive your 3% boost on annual IRA contributions, sign up at robinhood.com/gold. Investing involves risks. Risk rate subject to change. 3% match requires Robinhood Gold. $5 a month for 1 year from first match. Must keep funds in IRA for 5 years. Go to robinhood.com/boost. Over 8 times the national average savings amount. Account interest rate claim is based on the data from the FDIC as of November 18th, 2024. Robinhood Financial LLC, member SIPC. Gold membership is offered by Robinhood Gold LLC. Back at it here with Vivek Jacob as we talk about the Toronto Raptors, Brandon Ingram, the outlook for the medium and long-term future now that we've kind of squared away what this means for the rest of the season. Next season, I am fascinated to see how this all works out, man, and who will actually be on the team, who will be playing in specific lineups with Brandon Ingram and Scotty Barnes and Emmanuel Quickley. Beyond that, I think, what the roster looks like is very much open to interpretation. What's your expectation for let's talk about the RJ elephant, right? They have a high draft pick. Where they pick is still TBD. We don't know what that's going to do to the roster dynamics, whether they get, it's a VJ Edgecombe that changes the dynamics at the 2-guard spot. If they get a big man, say it's like a Kaman Malawak or something like that, that changes the dynamics of the front court. Do they get another guard in Dylan Harper, who's a creator? Like, excuse me. There's a lot of ways that the draft can kind of change what the roster looks like, but assuming they just get the most talented guy and add him to the books and, try to stay the course mostly with what the team is here, RJ Barrett becomes the guy who sort of is most in focus. They're going to be expensive, right? If Ingram gets a lot of money, they're going to be very close, if not over the tax. And Bobby Webster did say something interesting today, kind of about how since 2017, 18, 19, the last time the Raptors paid the tax, the only time they have was when they won the title. But the sort of calculus of when you pay the tax has changed. And there are teams now that pay the tax that are not necessarily contenders. It's just kind of part of the deal when you're trying to be a good team in a lot of cases. So that opens me up to the idea that they might just pay everybody and be in the tax next year and duck out when the cap starts to rise in 2026 and beyond. But yeah, like, where do you see this RJ thing going? Do you see him being on the team? What do you think of the fit between him, Ingram, and Scotty Barnes? And sort of, do you think he's even on the team next season?
Yeah, so I wrote at Raptors in 7 that I believe that this starts the clock on the end of RJ's tenure as a Raptor. I do think that, from a talent standpoint, obviously, the biggest strength that RJ brings is his scoring. And now there's someone on the roster who does that better than he does. And I do think that when you look at the defensive dynamics, obviously we saw the strengths of this team over that 10-game stretch where they went 8-2 and had the league's best defensive rating for those 10 games. We talked before about, how quickly RJ and Grady Dick would not be a viable defensive trio. And I don't think, quickly RJ and Brandon is ideal.
Right.
And so to me, who's the odd one out in that scenario? It's RJ. And so, he becomes extension eligible this summer. They might just tell him, we're happy for you to bet on yourself if you like, and see what the numbers look like with all these other mouths to feed. Mm-hmm. But I do think we will get to a point, unless RJ's we've seen kind of spots here and there where the defense has looked pretty good. Unless, that were to completely turn around, I don't know that this is a viable fit. I think this is now where you look at that shooting guard spot and you say, hey, who can really give us the 3-point volume and defense that we need here? Hey, you know what? Even like logically, if I were to look at it right now, you could argue that with a scorer like Ingram, Ochai might be a better fit at the shooting guard slot.
Totally. Like, it's tough. It's really hard to gauge what they think about RJ Barrett and how much the Canadianness of it all kind of factors into their thinking. Obviously, they just traded away Kelly Olynyk. Like, they will trade away Canadian guys. They're not worried about that, but Barrett feels a little different.
Unless his name is Chris Boucher.
100%. Yeah, no, he's invincible here forever. He's new Udonis Haslem. Yeah, like RJ feels a little different because he is like the best Canadian player they've ever had, and he feels like he kind of wears the Canadian sort of label on his sleeve very proudly. And, I don't know if it's just being back in a close proximity to Osmos has made him have the powers he has on the floor. Like, I think it's a different conversation for them to go and trade RJ Barrett than it is for them to trade Kelly Olynyk, right? Like, that's going to be something that they have to sort of carefully consider. There's a PR element of it and all of that. I think the comment Bobby made about paying the tax, I wonder if they just try to see what they have next year with as much talent as possible, which means RJ Barrett's on the team, regardless of what they pay Ingram. You can get out of the tax by the end of the season. Like Blake Murphy noted that in his cap breakdown after the deals, that you don't have to be tax compliant until the end of the year. You don't have to be at the start of the year. You can go into the season over the tax, get into the tax by the end and not pay the tax. And if you're really good, just pay the tax. It's totally fine. So I would bet against an RJ Barrett trade this summer. If there is one, it's probably for like a couple of guys who fill out the depth. Shout out to Discord user Cadillac, who pitched a Chicago Bulls trade where Ayo Dosunmu and Jalen Smith come back. That's the sicko stuff we love. Trade deadline's over. Let's get back in the trade machine, baby. It's I think they're probably going to hold off on making that decision this summer. What does that mean for the team next year, though? The name Manu Ginobili has been invoked when the team has talked about RJ Barrett before. Do they convince him to be a 6-man next year? Is that like viable where you start Ochai or Grady Dick? I mean, the shooting with Grady Dick, Quickly, Ingram, Scotty Pirtle, that could be a lot of fun. Obviously, Ochai, a better defender, decent enough shooter himself, nice fifth cog in that lineup, could totally work. I think there's different options there. Jacoby Walter might be a long-term option to start too. Like, don't rule that out. Maybe not next year, but down the line. Is there a world in which they just convince, hey, RJ, like, you're going to be better just kind of running with the fun bench unit we're collecting here? You make a lot of money, but, can you be a really supercharged 6-man, go win yourself 6-man of the year, something like that? I've been reticent to sort of pitch that idea before with the current team they have, but with the way the dynamics are with Ingram now, I kind of think it makes a lot of sense. What do you think?
I think that's really the sensible option. I don't know that there is much of a conversation that RJ would entertain with regards to that.
Right. He's a proud guy. There's no doubt.
Yeah. And I also think it'd be a tough sell paying a guy $30 million to come off the bench.
Sure.
So I think, I think you make total sense from a basketball standpoint. I could absolutely see that being the most viable option. I just don't know in terms of, the actual discussions and in terms of, would it hurt the chemistry in the locker room a little bit? How would RJ take to that? How would he respond to that? I think that would be a serious thing to consider. So, it could be one of those things where you even, bring that up with him and he might just be like, hey, maybe it's time for me to move on. Or maybe the front office can be like, hey, that's fine. We got what we wanted.
or we live in trying times here, Big V. It's the country is under economic threat, tariffs, annexation, not to get too in the weeds here. But can you convince RJ Barrett to band together, do it for the country, do it for the nation, and just be the 6-man this team needs? Darko Rajakovic has been able to elicit buy-in before from guys. He turned RJ Barrett's career around by streamlining the way he plays. Maybe he's the man for the job.
Yeah, I mean, who knows? Maybe, all that Manu film has like subliminally just been like, hey, maybe this is who you are.
Right? There's
Yeah.
something there. Go win yourself 6 Man
Yeah.
of the Year, RJ. Who's getting paid off of that? You are, friend. I don't know.
Yeah, but I do think, logically, I think that conversation ends very quickly if you start it. I think RJ is, smart enough to recognize that he is still, very much on an upward trend in terms of his salary, and
Mhm.
uh, moving to the bench is not a way to increase that.
Totally
Increase that
fair.
earning potential. And so I think that's the part where he will recognize that I need to be starting, to get to that next contract, to level up that next contract. And if you do entertain that conversation, I think it ends very quickly.
Who's to say? We'll see. I do think the fit of the starters with RJ in there with Ingram, like defensively, I actually don't think it's a problem. I think Ingram, Scotty, Pirtle across the 3-4-5 is just so functionally huge that they're going to be a pretty good defense. Like Ingram's not a great
Yeah.
defender on his own, but he's been part of good defenses, and just like having a 7'3" wingspan is very, very valuable for that. And yeah, I don't have concerns about the defensive fit there. I think quickly, has shown a capacity to be a better defender than he's been. It's been a nice couple games since he got back. I think RJ will see, but even if he's not a great defensive player, like again, just being huge goes a long way. And all of a sudden, this team has another guy who is 6'8" with a long wingspan to kind of help fill in the gaps. That I think is pretty helpful. The offensive fit is where it really is a question. Although I don't necessarily totally think RJ's fit within it is all that bad. He doesn't hold the ball much. He's an off-ball finisher type, right? Like he roars around screens, catches at the nail, drives to the bucket. He finishes in transition like a bull. Like I think the real concern fit-wise is Ingram and Scotty and how they can kind of coexist and adapt to one another. RJ, I think, can fit into that just fine. The shooting, we'll see. Like that's not a lot of shooting. Teams don't really care about RJ taking threes, even though he's hitting them at a reasonable rate this season. That's like the big kind of hang up here, and why a guy like a Grady or an Ochai there makes more sense functionally. But I don't think it's like an unworkable fit either. I think they can just sort of talent their way with those 5 guys to some pretty good results, even if it's not like a perfect, harmonious, utopic basketball fit. Any other thoughts on next year?
I agree with that.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. I think it's more so like looking at the 5, the starting 5, I think it's very clear that a 3-and-D guy would fit into that shooting guard role.
Absolutely.
And
yeah.
I think that's more what it is. Like, so for example, say hypothetically, not to go with Canadian examples, but if someone were to look at the other 4 guys and say, would you rather have Luguentz Dort instead of RJ, or even Dylan Brooks instead of RJ? I think I would take that for sure, just in terms of the fit.
I'll tell you who would rather have Luguentz Dort on his own team as opposed to the other team is Brandon Ingram, based on last year's playoffs. Of course, he was hurt. He was hurt, and Luguentz Dort's a maniac. Yeah. Next year, man, I'm excited to watch interesting basketball, man. It's going to be fascinating. And again, like if they draft someone really good at the top of the draft, it makes it even more fascinating. Did you have something else?
Yeah, so just one last thing, since we're on the subject of the summer and looking towards next year, for the people who are still kind of down about Ingram, I would ask, how would you feel if the Raptors kind of finished out the season, had their draft pick, and then signed Brandon Ingram? That's that's the purpose of pre-agency.
Yeah, 100%.
That's effectively what the Raptors are doing here. As long as they stay true to the tank here, that's effectively what they've done. So for the people who are down on the trade, I would just ask that. And for the people who are down on the trade, I would also ask you to remember that we have criticized this organization for not recouping assets for expiring contracts.
Yep. Great asset
done
management.
exactly that here.
No doubt about it. It's like great asset management here.
Yeah. So that's that. And then, going into contract negotiations in the summer, Bobby talked about how they believe they have the best medical staff in the league. The other thing I would also point out is if you exclude this season, because I think, there have been the Pelicans' own tanking efforts that have factored into the time that Brandon Ingram has missed. If you were to look at his 5-year career with the Pelicans before that, he played in 74% of games.
Right.
So he's had his share of injuries, but it's not like horrible, And I think people have kept peddling this whole, he hasn't played at least 65 games since his rookie year, and have made it sound a lot worse than it is, when I think it's a bit disingenuous, because if you look at the 2019-20 season, he played 61 games in a 72-game season. You look at the 2020-21 season, he played 60 games in a 72-game season. That's the equivalent of playing 70 games in an 82-game season.
Sure. Yeah, no, that's totally fair. The previous couple of years, the 55 and 45, the following 2 years, certainly a concern. He wasn't healthy for the playoffs last year. Like, again, if he's healthy for the playoffs, who cares? It's like, you can survive. Guys are going to play 65 games on average, basically, in the modern NBA anyway. Guys are going to miss time. It's just how it goes. If you think you can kind of remove him from the Pelicans' cursed franchise stuff, then I think it's a worthwhile bet, no doubt. If they pay him and he's not healthy, then that becomes a big disaster, and it's how this fails. But there's lots of reasons to think it does work too. We'll come back on the other side here, Big V, get into the longer term outlook, 2, 3, 4, 5 years down the line. What does this deal mean? What could it lead to? We'll do that to close things out in just a sec. Today's show is brought to you by our friends at Game Time, the best place to go buy tickets for the sporting events that you want to go to. I love Game Time. I use it all the time because it's super easy. I'm a dum-dum. I also don't like to go and peruse and shop for too much or go onto too many apps. I just want to go in, get out, and get the thing I want, and Game Time is great for that. They have Game Time Picks. It does all the hard work for you. It curates the best deals, so you don't have to waste time searching through endless ticket listings that aren't good. You just get the good ones right in your face. Of course, it comes with all kinds of wonderful features. You get seat views. You get to know exactly what you're going to be looking at. If you're someone like me who likes to go and travel to sporting events or sporting venues you haven't been to before, and you want to know, am I going to be sitting behind a big pillar here in this seat? Don't worry. Game Time will make it so you're not sitting behind a big pillar. You got yourself a good view of the action. It's wonderful. Go check it out. They have the lowest price guarantee as well. If you find a better deal somewhere else, they're going to refund you 110% of the difference. Plus, your tickets are guaranteed to be delivered on time with easy cancellation options if something comes up. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app. Create an account. Use the code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account. Redeem the code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets. Lowest price. Guaranteed. All right, back at it here with Big V, Vivek Jacob, talking about what comes next down the line for the Raptors in the wake of the Brandon Ingram trade. Obviously, this is, as Bobby Webster outlined, a future-looking move more than anything else. And so, what are the sort of ripple effects this could have 2, 3, 4 years down the line as the Scotty Barnes max kicks in next year? Emmanuel quickly moves into year 2 of his 5-year deal. Those are the guys who are locked up. Ingram's going to be locked up as well. What do you think this means as far as sort of the longer term vision here, Big V? Like, do you think this is the team they're just going to go to war with? Or do you think this is like the next logical step in what their usual MO has been, which is accrue talent and then when the opportunity strikes, go and improve upon that talent with more moves?
I think it's the latter. I think it's what you said in terms of, identifying opportunities to buy low and then just keep escalating in that manner. Now, if someone turns into something absolutely spectacular, and that'll always be the goal, then you hang on to those players. But I think, as far as the core now, I think there is a challenge, by acquiring Ingram, that you are laying out a challenge to RJ. You are laying out a challenge on some level to Emmanuel quickly. And you got to keep up now, right?
Yep.
Like, in terms of the two best guys on the roster now, it is Ingram and Scotty. Those are the two guys who have made an all-star team. Those are the two guys that stand out in terms of their ability. And quickly, and RJ, it's still like we're trying to eke out potential, right? We're still trying to see if quickly can be an all-star potential guy. Or rather, he has the potential, I would say. We have to see him do it, right? And frankly, I would say Ingram, one all-star team in the West is like 3 in the East, man. Like
he was an injury replacement. We should say that. One injury replacement in the West. So yeah, there's that. But
yeah, but I think that's sort of the challenge that's been laid out. Mm-hmm. And now it's like, hey, can you keep up? And if you can push the guys in that way, they're either going to level up, and they're going to put pressure back on the organization to say, hey, this is what we are now, or they're going to say, hey, we've kind of pushed against whatever door they end up pushing against or wall they end up pushing against in the postseason, and then you got questions to answer from there.
For sure. For me, like, the long-term vision with this specific group of players seems pretty obvious to me. They're trying to do the 2013 to 2017, 2018 thing, right? Where it's just like, we have a lot of good players. Maybe we don't have that super high-end, top-end talent, but we have enough good players and we trust our development to bring more good players along that we can just have a sustained run of being pretty good. And, it's not the 2015 Eastern Conference. Certainly, it's a better conference. It's not just dominated by LeBron James and a bunch of, various lunches that he's eating. It's, there's a little bit more heat to it. But that said, like, if you can be a perennial top 3, 4, 5 team in the Eastern Conference, like, that is a wonderful thing to shoot for. That is like a build working out well. And I think they have the requisite talent now. Again, we'll see about the fit and how the talent gets amplified by the fit. Very much an open question, but they have the talent to be in that mix, right? Like, I don't think there's any question about that. And I am fascinated to see how this sort of shadow core comes along, right? Grady Dick, I think you'd probably classify in that, although maybe he's part of the regular core. We'll see. He's still young. He's still got many steps to take in his development. He's 21 years old. Jacoby Walter, Jonathan Mobo, Jamal Shed. All of these guys are super interesting. Who they draft in the summer, I mean, again, the future gets so much more crystallized and interesting depending on how the draft lottery goes and who they bring in. If it's Cooper Flagg, like, fascinating conundrum, right? Like, oh, we have another 6'9" good wing player. Oh, I mean, maybe it's just like the absolute dream of Bobby and Masai to have that, but Vision 6'9" Redux. But yeah, I think the sort of goal here with this move is to set up an ecosystem where you can win games and be competitive year in, year out, and parlay that position into more when the opportunity strikes, as they did with the Leonard trade. And look, they're not going to do the Kawhi Leonard trade again. That was a once in a generation, once in a lifetime happenstance of events. The stars aligned perfectly. It just worked out. But that doesn't mean you have to go and do the Kawhi Leonard trade again. There are other ways to go and get a talent to add to the mix, right? Like, in being opportunistic, being in the position where you have a lot of good players who then can go trade for better players. Like, it's a proven way to win. It's a proven way to go about a build. And when they get the sort of addition of a high pick this year to expedite all of it and improve their talent quotient and all of that, like, I think it makes a lot of sense. And I think the sort of grand vision of, perennial 50-ish win team is certainly there over the next 2, 3, 4 years. Like, that's on the table for them. And is that, like, acceptable to you? Like, do you feel like they sort of hit the fast forward button too prematurely here? Or does the idea of setting up a team with the talent to be pretty good, like, does that appeal to you over doing the lottery thing again next year, doing the sort of trade your veterans for more veterans who you then trade again next year, which was the other option at this deadline? I know where I sit. People who listen to the show know where I sit, but like, does that feel like a reasonable vision for a build to you?
Yeah, no, absolutely. This is what I believe in. And I think, in terms of answering the next questions of Scotty, of Ingram, of Quickly, whoever it is, about getting to the postseason and then seeing what weaknesses they have there, what are their shortcomings in that type of setting, and then graduating from that. And so that's where you want to consistently be making the postseason and consistently, part of why the Raptors were able to get to that 2019 team is because of all the lessons that were learned over the course of 2014 to 2018.
Yep.
And, there were many different changes that they made as they learned as they went along, right? It's like, oh, okay, you go out and get Lou Williams. Then it's like, okay, you know what? Lou Williams doesn't make sense in the postseason. And it's like, and then you move on from that. And then you get to the point where it's like, oh, we got to revamp the offense. And then it's like, okay, you know what? Certain guys, you need a baseline of defense, right? And then so you make those changes. And so that evolution, that thinking doesn't happen if you're not consistently putting yourself in the postseason and learning those hard truths.
Yep. No doubt. Being good portends being more good very often. And if not, hey, you had some fun along the way. A regular season where you win a lot of games. Pretty good thing to watch. If you ask me, having gone through the weeds of the last few seasons, give me the fun of a 50-win team. And again, that's the upside here. That's what this team can be as currently constructed. I think if all things fall into place and the pick works out this summer, like that's on the table with the little upside beyond that. And then you parlay that into something more down the line if the opportunity strikes. Over under 43.5 wins next season. What do you got?
43.5. I will take the over.
Yeah, I think it'll be good. I think it'll be pretty good, man.
Yeah, I mean,
provided, obviously, but yeah.
Yeah, I think maybe the one thing that you look at right now is what the bench depth looks like for next season. Like you're still depending on young guys for next season, and from that standpoint, like the losses of Bruce and Kelly, like if you were to put those guys in with what next year's team looked like, then you'd say, that's a 50+ win team. But I think not having that bench experience, I think that's something you got to factor for. And then, of course, just the learnings that these guys are going to have playing together, and going at it together. So I think I'll take over 43.5, but maybe not too much higher than that.
I see your concerns about the depth, and then I just remember 2017-18, second year Pascal Siakam, second year Fred VanVleet, third year Norman Powell, bench mob city. Internal growth can happen, and like
it'd
Walter,
be wonderful.
Shed, Dick, Mobo. Again, they're going to have a high pick in this draft, like Dylan Harper running the second unit, baby. Let's go. RJ Barrett running the second unit while Dylan Harper starts. I forgot about that. There's ways in which this gets real interesting real fast for the Raptors. And that, I mean, they're smart to still be levying themselves towards that pick this summer. I am not usually a fan of the tank, but in this situation, it makes perfect sense to go and angle for that because it changes the dynamics of things.
Hey.
I'm on Team Tank, baby. I'm here. We made it. They're doing it ethically, though. They're playing young guys and developing them, bringing them along. It's ethical. It's not garbage. It's not last year's tank where Jordan Wara was ruining my life every single day. Different kind of vibe. We'll leave it there. Big V, thanks so much
full
for hanging
circle.
out, buddy.
Just like Nora did when Brandon Ingram spun him around.
We'll leave it there. Anything you want to plug for the good people, pal?
Just the usual stuff. You can check out my latest for Raptors in 7, where I went in depth about Brandon Ingram. I'll have more today off the Bobby presser. And usual stuff at Sportsnet, at Sportscasting, at Basketball Insiders, and you can follow it all on Twitter and Blue Sky at Vivek Jacob.
Hell yeah! I also forgot to mention Jakob Poeltl is part of that bench mob. Talk about full circle, baby. Good times. All right, we'll leave it there. Please follow, subscribe, rate, review, newsletter. I'm going to have some fun stuff later. Getting a little hypothetical with the newsletter today in some classic dumb Sean fashion. We've got, of course, many podcasts from this week. We got the reaction to the Ingram trade yesterday morning. We got a little deeper dive on that, plus the deadline reaction with Jake Madison of Locked On Pelicans dropped last night. That was a good episode. Lots of good stuff from Jake in there, the handsomest man at Locked On. And then you can also, of course, find today's show and rock with it and support and all that good stuff. You've already found it. You already listened to the whole thing, so I don't know why I'm saying that. Either way, back again next week to talk about getting blasted by the Thunder on Friday. They play another game Sunday. Busy schedule coming up. We will have it all covered for you here. And hopefully Brandon Ingram gets into a game or two at some point here soon. We can talk about that as well. Thanks so much for hanging out. Talk to you soon. Bye-bye.